Rutherford Issues with Brian Barrett on FM 101.9 and AM 1450 Murfreesboro, FM 100.5 Smyrna. Listen and watch at WGNSradio.com.
And Rutherford Issues today is powered by Middle Tennessee Electric. Would you like to take charge of that energy bill? Well, download the free MyMTE app. You can track your usage, pay bills, report outages right there from your phone. Well, today we are going to be talking with Deborah Fisher. Deborah is the executive director of the Tennessee Coalition for Open Government. Among the many things that you do, I find out, Deborah, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, Brian.
Good to have you. So you also do some teaching over at MTSU too, right?
I do. I teach a reporting and an editing class, and I'm director of the Siegenthaler Chair in First Amendment Studies, where I have the opportunity to bring in speakers to talk about First Amendment things. And we also run something called the First Amendment Encyclopedia. And you can find that online, but it has lots of information about the 5 freedoms.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So you teach on reporting. So are you in the mass communications type of? Okay.
Yes.
Is that part of your background?
Yes, I was a journalist for 25 years.
I'm sorry.
I know. Apology accepted. Yeah, but yes. So I did that for 25 years before moving into these roles. With TCOG, I've been with Tennessee Coalition for Open Government for over 12 years now, and a little bit less working down at MTSU.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So your reporting days, or are we talking about, out on the street with the camera and, here's our half-inch of snow and that kind of thing?
Yeah. Although, I work for some small newspapers in Texas, and at 3 different newspapers in Texas. And at the time, they still had reporters just with a little notebook and a pen, and that's basically what we had. But it was great.
I went to electronic media in my mind automatically. That's kind of my background. I should have thought about that. But the newspaper industry certainly has seen a lot of changes, hasn't it?
Oh, tremendous changes. I got into it in the 90s after college, and downsized newsrooms. They're still putting out stuff. They've adapted to the web, but certainly we've seen changes there.
How does that affect, I guess, kind of what TCOG is about, open government and access, and the downsizing of newsrooms, and I guess we could add to that, the everyday journalist. So, I mean, how has that changed, I guess, access to information?
Oh, that's such a good question, because I spend a lot of my days talking with journalists and citizens, but journalists who are trying to get access to public records and hitting roadblocks and people resisting, giving it. And so, as time has moved on, I think that TCOG has played an important role in helping newsrooms. I talk to newsrooms all across the state. I mean, really small newsrooms with 1 or 2 people in them, and some larger newsrooms, both print, radio occasionally, and also broadcast a lot. So I think, in terms of the industry, at least in the newspaper industry getting smaller, at least in terms of how large the newsrooms are, it's important that there be a consistent voice in the state that advocates for transparency in government. And that's what TCOG does. Yeah. We're sort of, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, like for us and the changes, you asked me right before we went on how long I'd been doing this, and as my kids would say, before Moses. But the radio job has changed so much. For instance, you said, I didn't know there was video today. Well, this is an industry that's seeing a surge into just trying to meet people where they are, whether it's it's a broadcast platform. So radio is not only over-the-air radio, but it's streaming audio, it's streaming video, our website where we do local news. And so organizations are morphing into, I guess, trying to meet people wherever they are. And while that's good, that's also difficult at the same time, especially for those trying to provide that information.
It is so challenging because learning new skills, learning how to do different things, like you said, meet the audience where it's at. So, you can't just focus in on one thing. So that's why we do try to bring some expertise related to the public records law, related to the open meetings law, related to access to courtrooms, and court information to the table. We're part of the ecosystem, I think, for journalists, but we're not just for journalists. I talked to a lot of citizens, talked to 2 yesterday, about their issues too. But for journalism, we definitely, try to provide some resources and advocacy.
Trying to multitask is my issue with everything.
See.
You see all the controls that I have? It looks like a starship, doesn't it, over here? We have joining us today from the Tennessee Coalition for Open Government, Deborah Fisher, the executive director. What is the public's most common misconception about access to public records?
They probably think it's easier than it is. What we do is we run a helpline, so I often hear about problems people are having, but we also track public records. We also track changes at the legislature in terms of access statutes that allow you to access public records, as well as court cases. And I think people probably think it's an easier process and are a little bit surprised when a state agency or an entity says, it'll be, 3 months before we'll get you those records. Or they say something like, it'll be $3,000. And you're like, what?
What?
And like a normal person and a normal journalist.
Sure.
Let me ask you,
absolutely,
Brian,
yes.
would you pay $3,000?
Personally, no.
Yeah, right. And would your station? I mean, it's just like, that is one of the trends we are seeing. And in terms of access to records is the increasing cost.
We have had instances where the access to the information for a particular news story, as you mentioned, may take months to get, and by the time that information comes out and the story is represented with that new information, a lot of the public comment is, well, you're kind of late to the game here, or how is this a story now? That happened months ago.
Right.
There is new information, but several months, it's a long time in terms of news, instantaneous news.
Right. No, I agree. And I think the delays that government entities are putting up to journalists and to others on getting access to records really undermines the Tennessee Public Records Act, which is about 70 years old, almost. And I think that is a serious thing that we need to look at, and why we're having such delays and other barriers to getting access to records, because, whether you're a citizen, for journalists, they're trying to get good information, right? So the premise of TCOG is that people have a right to know what their government is doing, and not just what government chooses to tell them about what the government is doing. And sometimes that requires access to actual records, right? So in this space of time before you get the actual documents that show what has happened, there's been a lot of people telling you what has happened, and that seems to, and I'm not saying they're telling you wrong things, right?
Sure.
But you need the actual information, the actual documented information, and people need journalists to have the actual documented information. We don't want fake news. We want the real thing, right? And so it's really discouraging, because I think it undermines transparency in government for all Tennesseans when that happens.
And one of the things that during that answer was going through my mind is, I think a lot of, let's just say Tennesseans, since that's what we're talking about, think that this is maybe a way for the government not to release that information, or a roadblock that is put up to keep that information from coming out, which there's a process, yes, but it's maybe a perception of, well, this is why we can't find out this or that,
It's hard to say, and I would not make that judgment in all cases for the delays. But I was asked once, what is the hardest public record to get? And my answer was, and remains to this day, the record that government doesn't want you to have.
Sure.
It's true.
Right.
And I think that, what we have seen, unfortunately, is government entities look at the public records law and look at the exemptions to the public records law and decide that exemptions that don't specifically look like they would apply actually do apply. And so let's say you ask for something, they cite an exemption that it's not public, and you're left with the only way to challenge that is in court. So you would have to pay money to go to court. So there are sort of these kinds of trends where government is quick to deny access to something on sort of not really, solid grounds. So, I don't know. I don't like to read into the intentions too much, but there are instances where I think that is the case.
Going back to that, maybe undermining public confidence, do we see that in this world of fake news? You used that term a second ago. People not trusting what they see many times. And I think this is a rabbit hole that we have continued to dig further down into.
Yeah, I think that's true. We just are bombarded with so much information, with so much talk, and it does become kind of confusing about what is right. And I do think people lose their trust for different reasons, and in the media, but also in politicians and that kind of thing. And, it is, I think someone has to be kind of wise in who they listen to, who's credible, who presents things in an objective way. And also who, has the goods, has the records, brings the receipts to the table, as they say, about a story. And so anyway, I do think that there are some issues in open government, in the open government world, that Tennessee could do better.
Well, let's talk about a few of those. Deborah Fisher is with us, Executive Director of the Tennessee Coalition for Open Government. I think in this world of media that has, I guess, folded in opinion with news, and where do you get your news, and you gravitate toward the opinion side that you agree with most, and that's where you get your news, and that there's a divide greater than it's ever been in that realm nowadays. And so I'm sure that's affecting trends and where people really what they think and their perception of open government.
Yeah. Well, it is true that a lot of the news space out there is through opinions, I suppose, and through talk. I mean, we're on talk radio right now, right? But I think that people just have to use their noggin. They have to use their own critical thinking about what they hear and be able to separate, okay, that was fact, that is an opinion, and it's okay to listen to opinions. I don't have any issue with that. That's a good thing. But, you sometimes, to really get to the facts, you have to be open-minded enough to seek out sources for that.
But we seemingly have lost our ability to be able to have a conversation, to hear something from maybe another perspective, because we've gotten so I don't know what the
polarized.
That but we've gotten so entrenched on our side of the fence, and we can't hear or listen to anyone else that has a different opinion anymore.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's like it's all about winning the argument,
right?
Rather than taking in information, and we're like all fighting, and it is frustrating, and it's frustrating. I don't know the answer to that.
No, who does?
I have a space that I'm trying to work, which is to try to provide access to government information, allow people to, attend open meetings, be able to watch their governing bodies in action in public, be able to get access to court information to be able to assess whether justice is fair and so forth. So that's my lane. But I am also frustrated that I was on a Facebook thread yesterday and this morning about Marsha Blackburn, and I probably should not be on Facebook, and whether she should participate in a debate. And, a lot of people for her said, no, she shouldn't do it. She's ahead. Why would you do that? Just give steam to the other opponent. But, I still maintain that a debate is a great American institution and they should do it. But, but there was such pushback on that. But I think it has to do with winning rather than maybe what might be good.
And what are you winning for? I mean, public office is to serve the people, but it's like we're trying to win prizes of jobs and government. I don't know. We could go down that trail.
We're not going to go down there. I'm sure Marsha Blackburn would be great in a debate. So I have
no
view of that.
Absolutely.
It was an interesting thought.
Yeah, I mean, you're right about that. So, let me get us back on a different rabbit trail here and talk about TCOG and how you can help people who are listening now. So, the general citizen, journalist, those in this industry like myself, TCOG is here to help. So, what are some things that you're seeing that any trends in public records access that people are asking about, and how can you help folks who are out there listening now?
Right, and we have a helpline. You can go to our website, just search us out, Tennessee Coalition for Open Government, and you'll get the contact information there. But I think what I see is, I mentioned the cost of public records, and we have just begun some research on that. Where we're trying to understand why the costs that we are hearing about anecdotally have really ballooned over the past decade. I mean, it is not uncommon. I mentioned 3,000. It's not uncommon to see cost. And the reason for that is that government entities can charge you for copies of public records, and they can put a labor rate on it. And what we have seen, at least anecdotally, over the past 10 years is when you used to make a public records request, let's say at the police station, heck, you could go in and just look at the blotter back in the day.
I did that when the PD was right next door. Yeah.
It was so nice. But at any rate, now you file a public records request. It goes to a public records request coordinator. It basically, many entities, especially state agencies, but local entities, are using their legal department to process all public records requests. So once it's in the lawyer's hands to process the records request, they're charging $50, $60, $70 an hour, sometimes more if it's a small town and they use a contract lawyer, And if you start, it takes us 2 hours to review and redact, you could easily be up to, a couple $100, $300. Well, you might be able to afford that, but I don't think most people really can. Honestly.
Yeah.
And
if you put media on top of that, like video or things like that have to be redacted and edited and you've got another you've got another skill set that's involved and another cost, right?
Yeah. So we have this convergence of things that are happening with the cost of public records, and that is the legislature every year piles lots more exemptions on, sort of big exemptions. Like I'll go into a few, but where then the attorneys who are handling the public records request in some state agency or local entity have to then review everything for possible redactions. So they have to read every single thing before it goes out, and they count that time. And they have to maybe research the law, see if something might be exempt. And all of a sudden, you're paying lawyer fees to access public records. And so I sort of blame it a little bit on the legislature writing some vague exemptions, but also, why is everything having to go through lawyers at a lawyer's rate? So we don't know the answer to that. And right now, we have just begun a project to start to kind of look closer at it. So, these are just some of our anecdotal things. We want to actually know. So we're doing some research on that.
Yeah, and I guess from state to state, their laws are different. So probably looking across the country to see who's doing it certain ways.
Absolutely.
Maybe there are states that have a little more open access, or that's not the right terminology. But what I mean,
some cap fees, some allow for a public interest exception because there are a lot of commercial requesters, but they still have to pay, but a public interest exception wouldn't. So there are a lot of ways that states deal with that. We actually have in our state one very good provision, which is free inspection of public records. And I do want listeners to know this, that if you're accessing public records, obviously you want copies. I want copies too. I want them emailed to me. I don't want to go pay for parking downtown, not Murfreesboro, Nashville. Right? And anyway, so you can actually inspect records for free, even records that they had to spend, say, 3 hours compiling and redacting that they could have charged you for if you had gotten copies. But you can actually go in and inspect those for free. I've done free inspection on things, and you can copy down anything you want from those records. And so that is a great thing in Tennessee, and that's kind of the balance, I guess, to these high fees. But about every 2 or 3 years, some lawmaker comes to the legislature with a bill to get rid of free inspection. Basically force us all into that $3,000 thing. So we need to keep free inspection, but we also need to look at the cost and say, because, if the cost were lower, more people would pay it, So anyway.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
So to find out more information about the Tennessee Coalition for Open Government, it's TCOG, so TCOG, TCOG.info. And all kinds of news, information, resources there. And you're here for anyone out there listening, I'm sure, right?
I am.
Well, very good. It was good to meet you today. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Brian. It was good to meet you.
Absolutely. Deborah Fisher joining today on the show. Deborah, the Executive Director of the Tennessee Coalition for Open Government. And if you came in just a little late, missed part of our conversation, the podcast will be up shortly at WGNSradio.com under Rutherford Issues, or wherever you catch your podcast, and even video over on the YouTube and Facebook channels there as well. I'm Brian Barrett, and until next time, take care out there.